Okay, so how do we know we're right? Well, Scripture is clear that we are to have good reasons and to know why we have good reasons for our faith. We're to be prepared to share those with those around us. And 1 Peter 3:15 is a perfect example of this. Sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. And Jude verse 3 says we are to contend for the faith as we are talking with others. And then as Jesus was issuing the Great Commission, he says we're to go and make disciples of all nations, and we're to teach them what he has taught us. So we're to disciple them as well. And that requires us to know what we believe, why we believe it, and to be able to reciprocate it and teach it to them. So it's clear that this is what we are to do, but it's how do we do it, especially in our society because emotions run high. It's normally people talking over each other in society currently. It's very polarized. It's anger meets anger, frustration meets frustration. So it's difficult to try and share our Christian convictions when this is the climate of discussion in society. So how do we faithfully witness in this climate? But also how do we prevent ourselves from falling prey to that aggression? Because it's easy to do the same. When someone's coming at you aggressively, you want to do the same. You feel insulted or offended. And that's the wrong step. So how do we do that? And before we ever get to talking with someone, we need to prepare ourselves. So there's a few different things we need to have the right mindset for. And so first we need to change how we view other people before we even get to other people. So Genesis 1:27 says that God created man in his own image. This means that people have an innate value and worth, you and me, but everyone else you come in contact with, including people who completely disagree with you, including people who might hate you for your views. You need to already have this in your mind before you get to them. This person's made in God's image. Whoever I come in contact with, a belligerent atheist or maybe a stumbling fellow Christian, it doesn't matter. They're made in God's image, and that will help flavor your conversation because how you view other people before you get to them affects how you communicate in every way. It affects your tone, maybe your expression, your body language. It affects the kinds of words you use. It's just how you treat them in general. So if you have the right mindset before you ever get to them, that's absolutely key. Because if you view them as a bumbling idiot and that's your view, your words will reflect that, and they will see that, and they will respond with that aggression we're trying to stay away from. We should also, before we get to them, be asking for help. Paul says this repeatedly. He asks his readers, please pray for me that God will give me the words, or he will open a door for the word to be preached. And James says this in James 1:5. If any of you lacks wisdom, if you feel unprepared, if you feel like you don't have the words to say, ask of God, who gives to all generously and without reproach, and it will be given to him. God helped the apostles. He gave them the words to say. They already knew a lot of that information, but he also helped them package it in the right way. When Peter was speaking to the Sanhedrin, he says the Holy Spirit filled him and helped him give that message. And Paul asks, please pray that the Holy Spirit would help me to do this and have every opportunity will be used well. We should be doing the same thing. Before we ever talk to someone, God, whomever you bring in my path today, give me wisdom to say the things that would honor and glorify you, but would also speak to their heart. We should be prepared before we get there. We also need to change how we view ourselves. So we change how we view them. We need to change how we view ourselves, that we are Christ's ambassadors, right? I think we don't think about this very much as we go throughout our day, maybe. But 2 Corinthians 5:20 says that we are ambassadors for Christ, that God is making an appeal through us to other people. And so that comes with a few different things. One, we should be prepared. I read 1 Peter 3:15 earlier. What does it say? Always being ready to make a defense. If you don't know anything about your view or about your beliefs, it's really hard to be ready to tell them about it. And we should also understand opposing views. And maybe you don't have that knowledge. Well, this is the time to say, how would someone who disagrees with me answer this? What do they think about this idea? What are the opposing views going around? You know, if you're a Republican, you know what the Democrats think. You might not have a good view, a well-rounded view of it, though. You should research it. Why do they think the way they do? So that when you come in contact with them, vice versa. If you're a Democrat, you should do the same thing for our politics. It's no different with worldviews. If you're a believer, you should know what you think. What do atheists think? why, and just have a general view of what they think, whether it's science or history. If you don't fully know, we'll get to how you understand that better in the conversation. But you should try to be prepared before you get there. I think it's valuable. And Paul did this. You think about Acts 17 where he's talking to on Mars Hill. He's giving his sermon there. He's preaching to them. He uses Greek poets. He uses Greek writings to talk to them. He quotes them directly. So he knew their writing. He knew their religion. He actually pointed to their idols and said, hey, I've looked at these. I've researched these. I want to show you how this actually leads to God. Right? He didn't start with the Jewish scriptures. Right? He didn't start with the Old Testament. He started with their view, their writings, and said, hey, I'm familiar with what you think, and I know how to lead this conversation well. And they respected him for that. Some of them said, hey, we want to hear more. You know about our view, I want to know about your view. We should do the same thing. If someone realizes that we're well studied and that we take the time to understand them, they're going to want to know about ours as well. Or that's the hope. We should also have Christ-like character when we talk to them. So we're not just being prepared, but we should be, if we're a representative of Christ, we should be living that, and specifically when we're talking to them too. So 1 Peter 3:15, I'm going to keep quoting this one, with gentleness and respect, right? Not with aggression or hostility, with gentleness and respect. Jesus says that we're, yes, to be shrewd, as wise as snakes, but innocent as doves. We're not to use that wisdom as a stick and hit them with it. We're going to be innocent as doves. Colossians 4, let your speech always be with grace. Not with anger, with grace, right? So this is how we're supposed to talk to them. Because if they see us and we say we're a professing Christian, yet we're just hitting them over the head with our views, those two don't go together. And they probably don't want to hear what a Christian is like because they don't like what Christians are like because that's how you're acting. We need to be acting like Christ. When Jesus spoke with people, let's say the woman at the well, he didn't beat her over the head with her sin and her wickedness. He asked her questions and he got to her heart and offered her hope, right? He was intentional with how he spoke with them and he was kind yet correcting. You see, there's a balance there. So we need to have Christ-like character. And we should be wise, right? So we ask for wisdom, but read the full portion of Colossians 4, 5 through 6. Yes, let your speech always be with grace, as though seasoned with salt, but why? So that you will know how you should respond to each person. Again, Jesus didn't talk to every person or crowd the same exact way. He didn't talk to the Pharisees the way he talked to the woman at the well, right? He didn't talk to a crowd the way he talked to one person at dinner. We should do the same thing. We should adapt our questions or adapt how we approach each situation. Is this person seeking? Is this person not? We should be wise with how we approach. So I want to give a quote here. There's a book on the table you guys can pass around and look at later as well. Greg Koukl in his book Tactics says these things. These three skills, knowledge, which is an accurately informed mind, wisdom, an artful method, and character, which is an attractive manner, play a part in every effective counter with a non-believer. And I would say with believers too. Because you're going to have conversations with people who say they're a believer, but maybe they're stumbling in another form or a certain doctrine, and you're having a conversation about that. You still need to have these three things, right? With anyone you talk to, I think knowledge, being prepared, having Christ-like character, and being wise with how you're talking to them is absolutely key. We also need to change how we view our goal, right? So we're changing how we view ourselves or others, how we view ourselves, and how we view our goal when we're talking to someone. So 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 5. For although we live in the flesh, we do not wage war according to the flesh, since the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but are powerful through God for the demolition of strongholds. We demolish arguments and every proud thing that is raised up against the knowledge of God, and we take every thought captive to obey Christ. So this is war language, right? Paul is pretty clear about what he's talking about, but we need to remember that we're battling lies and false viewpoints. You're not destroying someone. Your goal in that conversation is not to humiliate someone, right? If your goal is really to shine some light, speak some truth to lies, again, you're not trying to humiliate them. I think we get pretty amped up. We know what we're talking about. You don't, whether it's on Facebook or whether it's in person, and we become arrogant. And yeah, you may have won the argument. Maybe they say, yeah, I think you're right. Are they that much closer to coming to Christ, or did you just crush them? That's different, right? We're not there to humiliate them. So your goal is not to win an argument, but your goal is to shine some light, okay? Unless you're in a formal debate, There you are trying to persuade the audience, but it's different. Your goal is not to make yourself look good. I think I've seen apologists, and I've probably guilty of it myself, where I'm like, well, no, my answer was better. Well, maybe it was, but it's how I delivered it, right? I'm trying to get to the heart of them, it's not about me in this scenario. So your goal is to shine a light and to be a faithful witness in every conversation. And this is a weight that I think I put on myself with a lot of my friends, especially in high school and college. I'm not saving someone. I don't have the power to do that, right? It's God's work in someone's heart that does that. So I think sometimes when I would go into a conversation, I'm like, I got to say every right thing the way it needs to be. I need to get through all of these points at the right time so that they can be saved. Conversations are not that clean, and it's not up to me, right? Yes, I want to be faithful. I do want to be prepared. I want to be wise and kind and say the right things. But ultimately, it's God's work in that person's heart, and as they struggle with the information that maybe I presented, that God's going to work on them. You are not going to come out of every conversation where they're like, yeah, tell me about Jesus, I'm ready. I wish that was the case. It's just not going to happen, though. So don't put that weight on yourself every time you talk to the barista at Starbucks. It's not going to happen, okay? So yes, be prepared, be wise, be faithful. It's not your job to save someone. You are just to be that ambassador. And this one's a little controversial, but don't force the gospel into every conversation. Give the example of the barista with the Starbucks barista. You don't have enough time to go through all of it there. You might just have enough time to ask a couple questions about what they're thinking. Maybe not even that. What are you going to ask them? Sometimes someone is asking a question. And so this is where maybe that scale that I've given you kind of comes into play. Where are they at, right? Asking someone or telling them about the Bible and how it's reliable and these kinds of things to an atheist who doesn't even think a God exists, it probably isn't going to do anything. Or you're just another one of those pastors preaching to me. I don't need this. And you wasted your time. Instead, you can ask them about their view and ask them a key question about what they think and maybe speak a little truth into that lie because you only have 5 minutes. Maybe you do have an hour and you can get to the gospel. Great. Don't force feed it into the conversation because you're just going to interject all your thoughts and you have no idea what they think. Does that make sense? So if you have the chance for it, awesome. Go where the Spirit's leading you. But don't make it, I have to get to the foot of the cross every single time. It may not happen. And that is okay because remember, other believers are doing this too, hopefully. As you are talking to them, other people are going to be doing it too. And they're going to be doing work. We're all sowing in this person's heart. And maybe someone will be able to harvest and give the gospel and that person says, I'm ready. But it's because everybody else was faithfully asking questions and doing that work. And God is working all the way in their heart until that last moment. Maybe that's you, and maybe it's not. So Greg Koukl in his book Tactics, and he talks about this a lot. This is a really favorite analogy of mine that he says is put a pebble in their shoe or a stone in their shoe. Your goal with that conversation is to make them think about what you talked about later. If you think about if you ever had when you're hiking or walking around, you have a pebble in your shoe, you're like, man, I just can't get that out. It doesn't necessarily hurt all the time, it's just annoying. That's what your conversation should be doing, and that's what he talks about. Every time I talk to someone, he says, I go to CVS, talk to someone in line, ask them a couple questions, things about their wearing, and it leads to their beliefs. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And you leave a pebble in their shoe, and now they're thinking, what that guy said really got to me. Right? He didn't have time to preach the gospel, but he had time to ask questions about their view and speak a little truth. And now they're thinking about it. What happens when 10 believers over the next 6 months all put a pebble in that person's shoe? They got a shoe full of rocks, and they're like, I have to know more. You see what I'm saying? So I like how he uses that, and so that's why I'm using it here. Your goal is to get them to think about something, right? Okay, so now when you interact with them. So we talked about before you ever get there, we're changing our view about ourselves, about them, and about what our goal is. Right? Just being prepared. I know that sounds like a lot, but that's where we should be at before we ever get there. This is absolutely key. Remember I said emotions run high? James 1:19 says, everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. We really so badly, and it's a zeal sometimes to share what we think and to love them and to share the gospel. We should be listening to them first. We really should be asking questions. It's quick to hear, slow to speak, and definitely slow to anger. We need to listen to them. Ask questions. And they're probably not used to people listening to them, if I'm honest. I'm not. Like, yes, I'm teaching here, but if it comes to one-on-one, somebody wants to get their views across, right? Your goal is not to wait for that moment to interject my opinion. Keep asking them questions. Ask them what they think. So when they're talking, wherever the conversation is led, they'll say, well, I think the Bible is really evil. Oh, okay. What do you mean by evil? Instead of saying, no, it's not. That's not right. You see the difference? What do you mean by evil? Oh, have you read the Bible? You're asking questions instead of throwing it back at them. And now they're going to say, oh, I've never thought about that. And Greg Koukl will talk about this in his book. Most people are never asked, what do you mean by that? You ask them to define what they're talking about. Most of them don't even know. They're just repeating what they've been taught, what they've heard. And that gives you a chance to lead the conversation down that way. But if you just yelled at them that they're wrong, now they're on the defensive. When someone's on the defensive, they don't want to hear what you're saying because they're too busy defending themselves. See what I mean? And we do the same thing. We have to get away from that, slow to anger, right? And just continue to ask good questions. What brought you to that view? What do you mean by that? And they tell you, oh, okay. What evidence do you have for that? Or what sort of questions brought you to that idea? You're gathering information of what they think, why they think that way. Maybe it's a more personal thing. What led you to thinking this way? Man, that's a really interesting view. I've never heard that before. What caused you to get there? Right? You're still letting them talk. You're gathering information. You would have never had this information if you just patly said, you're wrong, or offered your view, right? And so asking questions does a few different things. One, it invites them into a conversation. It is inviting when you say, oh, that's really interesting. What do you mean by that? Can I know more? Can you clarify on this? How did you get that there? What sources are you reading? It's inviting them into a conversation rather than a battle. That's the difference. It also helps you understand their view, okay? Because we may have labels for people. Well, he's an atheist, so he believes these things. You might be familiar with it, but everyone's different, right? Everyone in this room believes certain things about the Bible, but they may have little nuances that we don't know, right? It would help if I asked you so we can better talk about that topic. If I say, well, no, I don't think that view's right, and here's why, and I give you this whole defense, you'll go, I don't actually think that way. And now you're hurt because I've misrepresented your view, and you realized I'm too busy talking about my thoughts and not yours. When it could have just helped if I just asked you, what do you mean by that? What do you mean you're an atheist? Does that mean you don't believe in a God? What do you mean you're a Christian? Some Christians believe widely different things. What do you mean you're a Mormon? Can you tell me specifically what that means? I'm not familiar with that. It's inviting and it helps you understand. It also tells you where to start. And I'm going to point back to the scale I gave you. Again, if they're an atheist, it probably doesn't help to throw the Bible at them. It really doesn't. They don't care. If they're asking you why you think the Bible is reliable, well, you have an opportunity to provide that. But if they don't believe a God ever exists, like on the bottom of that scale, it's the very bottom, they don't believe in a God or a higher power at all. That's a good place to start, right? Oh, tell me why don't you think there is a God? What do you think? If you never ask questions, you never know where they're at. And you can start in the wrong place and you just hit a wall. So this helps. It helps you understand the person too. A lot of people have experienced some form of church hurt, or they've been betrayed, or they've had a trauma in their life. And if you just go using your normal questions and arguments for Christianity, they're good, but it doesn't help when their heart is jaded and guarded, right? If you understand why they've clung to the view they do, now you can go, man, that's tough. That is really tough. How do you deal with that? Again, you're inviting them, you understand them, and you understand why. And now they're vulnerable, not in a sense of exploitation, but like, man, I don't know how I would do that. Have you ever thought about it this way? You see what I mean? They've opened it up and you're an inviting person and you can keep talking to them. So it gives you an opportunity as well. If you're inviting and asking questions, they might say, man, yeah, because you say, well, who do you think Jesus is? I think he's a good teacher. You're asking some really good questions and they look at you and go, what do you think Jesus is? There you go. Now you have a moment to say, okay, well, I think Jesus is this and this is why. Because you were asking questions and inviting them into it. You were kind, you were gentle. You took time to understand their view. Maybe they want to understand yours. Man, he's doing all these things. He's acting in ways people don't normally. He's not interjecting his opinion. Why do you think the way you think? Oh, okay. Well, thank you for asking. Here's what it is. And they might not agree with you, but you at least are given that chance that you would have never had if you just said, again, you're wrong. Jesus is the Son of God. You see what I mean? And they're on the defense already. So there's a time for correction, but it's how you do it. And this asking questions gives you an opportunity. Keep asking questions too. So some people, they hear this and they go, well, I asked 2 questions at the beginning. Yeah, but then the rest of the conversation was you attacking them. You got to the spot of spiritual topics that you liked and then just threw everything at them. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people do that too. Keep asking questions. I don't think the Bible is reliable. Oh, what do you mean by reliable? How did you get to that? Okay. Have you ever researched that? Oh, well, no. Okay. Have you ever considered this? I asked 3 different questions. They gave me a ton of information. I still pushed them towards an area and they go, no, I've never researched that. Have you ever considered that it would be really, really hard for them to change every single Bible there ever was around 400 AD? That's a specific example that Greg gives. And they go, no, I've never thought about that. So the Bible is reliable? Yeah, actually. And here you give some information. Keep asking good questions. And focus. People have a lot of opinions. We do. I have so many thoughts about the Bible and about God that I would love to tell everyone about who doesn't know about God. Ask specific questions. If they're frustrated, we've already had the example of the Bible teaching, it's evil or it's harsh. Why is there suffering? Focus on those. Don't shove it towards a topic you like. They're struggling with this one. Ask questions about that one. Focus on the conversation and the things they have told you. Don't lash out, because they are going to want to. And especially when you have asked really good questions and maybe they're starting to doubt their thoughts, they may not be on the defensive, but they're feeling maybe a little vulnerable, and they'll go, well, that's just dumb, or whatever it is. There might be some form of an insult, or maybe that's the way the conversation began. I've had many comments on YouTube where they'll insult me, my intelligence, well, that's stupid, you don't know anything, you're just an ignorant Christian. And if I responded the conversation's over, never went anywhere. Instead, what I've done is, man, I'm sorry you feel that way. That doesn't really help the conversation go anywhere. Do you mind telling me specifically in the video what you didn't like or what you don't agree with? I don't know how many people on my YouTube channel are going, man, I'm sorry. Most Christians would just want to yell at me and tell me that I'm going to hell because I don't believe in some Middle Eastern guy, and I'm sorry. I don't agree with this part. Oh, okay, what do you mean by it? You see how it starts? Don't lash out. And Scripture is clear on this. Proverbs 12. A fool's displeasure is known at once, right? Lashing out. How dare you say that? But whoever ignores an insult is sensible. How many times has Jesus insulted or even physically spat on, and he took it and instead continued to use the time to talk to those people? I do want to say, don't be afraid to walk away. If there's someone who is just steamrolling you with questions and thoughts and you're flustered or you're getting angry and frustrated and you know you're going to say something you regret, don't be afraid to walk away. You can, especially if this person does not care. They're mocking you the entire time. They're not letting the conversation go any way further. A good way to say is, we've talked about a lot of things. I'm going to go and research it a little bit more, and then we can talk about it later. Or, you just giving me a lot to think about. I'm going to go think about this some. Conversation's over. You did it softly. And then go research, because maybe you don't know enough. Maybe they're giving you questions and things you don't know how to answer. And that's okay. It diffuses the tension that might be building. You're not going to respond in a way that's going to end any future conversations with them. And it gives you a way out to go prepare more. Think about how the conversation went. When you're done talking with someone, right, after you've interacted, review yourself. How'd it go? Right? Did it turn aggressive really quickly? How'd you do? Did it go well? What questions that you asked went over well? Maybe specific topics came up. I didn't handle this one very well. I should have asked this question. Okay, well, think about that one and prepare it for next time that topic comes up. Maybe it's with that person or someone else. Man, when I asked this, it really, really upset them. I shouldn't have asked it that way. Focus on that. Go, okay, next time I'm not going to do it this way. How was your tone? Did you realize you were getting aggressive or arrogant? Maybe ask someone who was around you. Maybe you're with a friend and you're talking in a group. Ask them, hey, how did I sound? Was I a jerk? Yeah, man, you did not. Okay, Maybe you need to apologize, but change the way you come across. Say, hey, let me know if I'm coming off this way too. So how can you do better? And is there anything you need to research? Is there anything you just felt while you were talking with that person or a group, I know nothing about this. I don't know what to ask. I just don't know how to direct my thoughts on this. What do you need to research? Go study a little bit more. Maybe they're asking about how we know the Bible is reliable or evidence for the resurrection. I don't know. Go study it. And then next time you talk to that person, hopefully you can go, hey, remember when we were talking about this? I found some really cool things, and if you want, we can talk about it. Because one, you've already asked them questions and been inviting. You've researched the things, you told them, hey, I don't know enough about this. But they know you're an inviting person, and it was a good conversation. They'll want to talk with you more. Or just next time that conversation comes up with someone else, you've got what you need. But if you don't review, yeah, that was great, and you're never going to improve. The information you have to be prepared, like we started at the beginning, be prepared, you're never going to be more prepared. And you will fail. You will realize, man, I did not do well here. That's okay. You're going to get better at it. The goal is to, again, be that faithful witness. So, the book I have here, I highly recommend that everyone gets this book. So I've used some examples from it. I've used a quote from it. Greg Koukl, he runs a ministry where he does questions like this. He even has a radio show where he just takes questions from people, and he uses what he calls tactics. And so, like, his favorite question, the number one question he has is, what do you mean by that? Because a lot of people have different definitions of evil or God or even political terms. They use it all differently. And he just gives some really, really good examples. He talks about real life scenarios, both where it went well or where he did not do so well, and how we can learn from that. He's got a wealth of experience. So I recommend you guys pick up a copy of this and do some reading. It's easy to read. I feel like it's easy to read. There's not a lot of terminology. He gives each tactic a fun term to help us memorize it as well. So I've used it to not only flavor this presentation, but just to better equip me too, to where I realized, oh, I'm not doing this well. Let's listen to how Greg helps us out. So pick up tactics, and thanks for the first week. So next week we're going to talk more about what do you do when you come across someone who doesn't even believe that God exists. Maybe you're used to just using Scripture, and they don't want to hear about it. We're still going to hold to Scripture, but using that as your argument doesn't work. What do you do? Remember, we're going to talk about, does God exist? So we're going to start going into those kinds of things. Arguments for God's existence and how to talk to people like that. So, thanks, guys.